Okay, I'm waiting for this thing to turn on, and then we can rock and roll here. Are we on? Are we live? What is going on, YouTube? Let's see. Am I muted? I shouldn't be muted. No, you can hear me okay. Sorry. I'm getting a bunch of different messages from my computer here. So, my name's Vlad. Welcome to this live stream of my first impressions of Capture One Pro. So I am going to go through in this video, honestly, a genuine live first impression. I just installed Capture One Pro 21, version 21 on my iMac. I have not played with it at all. I'm pretty seasoned when it comes to Capture One. Pretty seasoned when it comes to Lightroom. I've made the switch from Adobe products to photo editing exclusively now in Capture One. I've used Capture One Pro 20 specifically for my Fujifilm cameras, and recently I made the purchase of this wonderful and beautiful Leica M9 Monochrom from Mr. Adam Lerner. You catch Adam on YouTube, and he's got an amazing podcast. I believe it's ISO 320. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments there if you see this, Adam. But anyway, I love this camera. I just got this camera about 2 weeks ago, and I've been shooting exclusively with it. And my 50mm Summicron lens, as you saw, probably I have a red filter attached to this lens. And what I want to do today is just honestly go through Capture One Pro 21 and see what I think. Edit some photos. I had a quick shoot with my wife earlier today where I tried a few different techniques. So you're going to see the raw photos. I have not edited these yet. I haven't even reviewed these yet. I haven't culled through them, so I haven't seen the ones that are in focus, out of focus. This is just an honest live run through of my photos in Capture One. So let's get started. I just installed everything, so I wouldn't bore everybody with the install process. I'm sure if you're upgrading for Capture One Pro 20, what you're gonna have to do is go to the Capture One website and log in, and then you're gonna see the ability to download, where you want to go to products and your licenses, where you see your licenses of Capture One, and you can see the download buttons where you would normally download updates of the Capture One software. What you'll want to do is click download Capture One, and it'll download the most current version of Capture One Pro 21. So that's what you'll want to do. It's about 600 megs, at least on my Mac. You'll want to install everything, and it'll actually, the sign-in process is a little strange. It's a little bit different than Capture One Pro 20. So the regular sign-in with Capture One Pro 20, usually you can just sign in and then authenticate or get the trial. If you have, you could authenticate usually using one of your license keys, if you have one, or try a trial. But what this makes you do is it has you log in directly. In Capture One Pro 20, what you used to be able to do, or what you would do, and sorry, I'm off to the side here, and I'll explain that in a second. I'm recording this, by the way, from a GoPro. So Capture One Pro 20, what you had to do was, if you wanted to activate the license key, you could enter the license key from the preferences, and then you could log in and then get your username and password and authenticate your specific version and license on your computer. Capture One Pro 21 is a little bit different. When you first launch the app, you're going to see a pop-up window, and then what seems like a whole bunch of different slides, a little carousel that kind of walks you through a few steps of setting it up. What I ended up doing, I'm not going to show that part. It's a little too late now. You see the windows open, and I'm actually going through this. But what you'll want to do is sign in. So it'll then, after it signs you in, it asks you for a license key. So you want to have that handy. So if you have it in your emails, just make sure you, when you upgrade to Capture One Pro 21, or if you get the subscription like I have, the monthly subscription, you have a license key. You'll want to have that handy, because that's the second step. So you'll log in with your username and password. It'll pull down, I'm assuming, what is your information, the catalog name and everything that you've had in the past, and then it'll ask you for your license key. You'll enter the license key, and then step two is, what I believe step two is, it asks you to import photos or locate photos or import some sample photos to start work with Capture One Pro 21. You don't actually have to do this if you already have a catalog installed. So I'll explain that in a second, because what I tried to do was, okay, well, I already used Capture One Pro 19 and 20, and I had a catalog, and I had session data from like earlier versions of Capture One installed on this computer. So I'm like, okay, I wasn't sure why Capture One just didn't see that automatically and just import the catalog. So I'm assuming it lets you get a fresh start, fresh install of the software, which can be really nice actually, especially if you want to separate your photos. But it doesn't do that. So it'll ask you, if you go to select from file like I did, I try to locate my catalog. It didn't actually, it wouldn't let you click on it. So I have my catalog local to my photos, so my photos folder on my iMac, and it wouldn't let you click on it. So I was like, okay, well that's annoying. Maybe I could just import it later. So I ended up skipping that option, and then I went through the rest of the steps. It shows you quickly that you can organize and make it your own. It talks about the styles, and it markets the fact that you can purchase style packs to customize and get quick looks in Capture One. And then it just logs you in and just asks you to launch the app, and it'll launch the app. And then after it launches the app, it actually looks for your catalog. So don't be alarmed if you don't have the ability to import it right from then and there. It's actually, I got a little annoyed, honestly, at first, but then it just became a little bit, it became pretty straightforward. So after you log in, you hit next, you launch the app, it'll import all of your photos. So it'll import your, it'll set up the hardware acceleration like it usually does, and it'll import your previous catalog, and it'll optimize it for this version of Capture One. So that's what we have. I didn't go through any of this. All I did was honestly import the photos from today's shoot, which you can see here in the right sidebar. We'll go through those in a second, but I didn't review anything else. So this is honestly the first time I'm looking at this. Quite honestly, the first time I'm looking at this. So let me move a few windows around here so we can get a better look, or at least I can get a better look at this at Capture One. So I'm, by the way, computer-wise, I am running on a late 2015 Retina 5K iMac. So not the iMac Pro, just a regular iMac with the 5K display. And so I'm running that machine. The reason why I like to mention that is because I am running, the latest software of Mac OS. So if that's important to you, just to know, that's the kind of power at least I'm getting from this machine. I have I think I have the 6 core, I forgot what processor I have on this, but I have 32 gigs of, just so I can give you some specs on the actual computer. So when you see me editing this, if there's no buffering or lagging from the YouTube live stream, you at least know what the capabilities of this computer are. So if you're weighing out whether or not you want to invest in Capture One Pro 21 and are not sure if your machine can handle it, I have a quad core. So I have the 4 gigahertz quad core Intel i7 processor in this, 32 gigs of memory, and I have the upgraded 4 gigs, the AMD Radeon R9 card in this computer, if it matters to you, if you'd like to know whether or not your system can handle it based upon me editing here. So again, 4 gigahertz quad core Intel i7 and 32 gigs of RAM. So that's what we're working with in this machine. I haven't had an issue. I don't anticipate I'll have an issue with Pro 21. I love Capture One Pro 20. I thought that was such an awesome update to the software. I love the UI. I thought it was very, very simple. I love the tools, and you'll see me actually going through some of the tools that I use, because I actually have some dust on the sensor, and I'm sure that there'll be a few things that we'll likely want to clean up in some of these files. So we'll go through it all, I promise. And I'll show you kind of a little bit of my editing process. So let's I guess look through the UI. I know a lot of apps now with this version of Catalina, with macOS Catalina. Actually, no, Big Sur. Excuse me, Big Sur. Wow, seems like just yesterday we were using Catalina. So we're on Big Sur, and everything's kind of refreshed, right? All the UI is a little bit cleaner. The icons have an update to them app-wide and system-wide, I should say. And then all of the UI just got simpler, I found. I'm not sure how I feel yet about some of the icons. I do think that they're a little overstyled, but that's just my personal opinion. But we have a very simple design to Capture One. I think the previous versions have been very tasteful, in my opinion, and I don't see this being any different. So first impressions at a first glance, I have the same tools I did in the past. So I have my import-export options. I have the ability to tether capture if I have a camera that's capable. I have all the redo, undos, and the auto adjust. which I actually never used, but we could play with, I guess, today. So we have all of our selections, all of the regular tools that we're used to, including some of the healing. And it looks like we actually have some extra, some nice tooltips now too. Not that we did in the past, but I always just use short keys. This is the first time I'm actually hovering over this. So I think you can see that. I'm just looking at, no, you actually can't see the hovers. I'm looking, I have OBS. I'm streaming this through OBS. And I realized that it doesn't actually do the tooltips and some of the popovers. So I'm also glancing at that to see what you're seeing on screen. But if you hover over the cursor tools, you should be able to see, it'll show you the short key, and it'll show you a little preview of how to use it and what it does, which is great. Same before and after. We have the grid. We have exposure warning. I don't use some of these tools, honestly. I see that there's like there's a YouTube Learn, so I'm assuming that there's tutorials and things that they've pre-recorded ahead of the launch of this new version of Capture One to get people a little bit more acclimated if they're either switching from Lightroom or Photoshop or another program that they were using in the past to Capture One and the way Capture One works. It's honestly really straightforward. I've never had an issue. In the past, what I really liked about Capture One, and everybody complained about this, there's a lot of photographers on YouTube that actually complain about the previous versions of Capture One and how it would catalog images. It would actually give you way more flexibility as a photographer to catalog your images. And what it really introduced that I really liked was that session-based workflow. So in Lightroom, if you're coming from Lightroom, you understand and you're used to having a catalog, right? Where you import your photos, all the metadata automatically organizes into folder by year, month, and day, right? And that becomes really useful. However, if you work with a lot of client work, you really don't care about when you shot something. You care about the actual session. At least I did when I first shot with Capture One. When I first shot with Capture One, I was shooting with Nikon. I was shooting with a D810, and I was tether shooting for almost everything. I found tethering in Capture One to be incredible. I loved it. I liked tethering in Lightroom, but sometimes it would drop, and I love the processing. I thought that I just got better results with Capture One in general. I love the way it rendered colors. I love the way I can have control over the type of sharpening and texture on images, and I thought that from a raw editing platform, I thought Capture One was far superior and would at some point take over and eclipse what Lightroom can do. And don't get me wrong, I think Lightroom is still a great tool. I love the cloud functionality that Adobe has built throughout their entire product suite. So if you're in the Adobe system and you're used to that, it's great. I love the cloud platform. I love the mobile apps. The apps are great, especially now that I'm using this Monochrom. Not that I can import from this M9. It doesn't have Wi-Fi, but I do have their default. I'm shooting DNGs, which is I'm not sure if it's in the Adobe standard for Adobe DNGs, but it is a DNG standard, which is nice. So I'm not shooting a specific like Fuji raw file. I'm just shooting a straight DNG, and I found that Lightroom actually does really well, especially if you convert your your raw files. I used to convert my raw files to DNG, sometimes for just to play around with the differences depending on the shot. When shooting Nikon, sometimes I would see people like giving DNGs with all the settings and everything exported out. So if you were importing from a tutorial, you would usually get a DNG and you'd see all the different settings and everything that somebody added, which I thought was really cool. So anyway, long story short, here's where we are. I've since transitioned almost exclusively to Capture One. I had the Fuji subscription, and the reason why it was funny enough, I didn't realize that OBS, if you have OBS connected, it doesn't play really nicely with Fuji webcam. So if you have, it'll work unless you have something like Capture One. I don't know if it's the same for Lightroom, but what I try to do is above here I have my Fuji X-T3, and I usually use that to record for videos and Zoom calls and everything. And obviously the image is amazing coming out of that camera. But the minute I turned it on, it was working in OBS, and then I opened up Capture One, and automatically just stopped. I think it was trying to import images directly from the camera at the same time, so it wouldn't broadcast because it had a connection to the software. So it was a little glitch and bug that I found. So That's again, if you're into any of this, if you're doing any live streaming, just so you know, if you're trying to share Capture One and you're usually using a Fuji or a Fuji webcam and relying on that for your actual video output, in this like little square here, little tiny square where I'm at, if you're used to that setup, you might want to rethink it, because it might not work as expected. Just a heads up. So I had to restart my computer a few times to figure it out, because I thought it was some sort of glitch or it was freeze. I don't know. Anyway, long story short, we figured that out. We're using the GoPro. Thank you, GoPro. This is the GoPro Hero 8. So we have it in the linear lens because wide's a little too wide. So we're recording into a mic in terms of the audio, and recording the video from the GoPro here. So and sharing just the Capture One window. So let's jump into it. Let's take a look at some photos and let's see what this thing can do. I really like the UI. I mean, it's very similar, to be honest with you. If I'm just toggling around some of these panes, I see all of my images. So just like I said, it does import, you know, your entire catalog. So see, I have all my recent imports. I still have my trash. It's still, I haven't emptied out this trash. As you can see, there's some images that I'm sure my wife will kill me if I show these on screen too long. But anyway, so I still have my entire catalog, and I didn't have to import this. Again, when you launch the app, it automatically just you know, finds the catalog in your photos, and it optimizes and as it does the hardware optimization, it just imports the catalog and make sure that these photos are optimized for this version of the software. So don't be alarmed, just as a heads up. Then we have our tethering settings. Again, we're not shooting tethered, so we don't have to worry about it. But we have everything here, and the session, and we're not gonna go through this because we're not tether shooting. We have lens corrections. We have we have some of our we have our color adjustments. Again, I'm shooting monochrome, so this won't really matter to me. But if you'd like, I can go into some of the color settings and actually adjust the Fuji files here. So I do have the Fuji files in front of us here. These are the XT. I believe these are the XT3, if I'm not mistaken. I was shooting with the X Pro 2 simultaneously, so that's why I'm kind of I could find out exactly. I could find out. This was shot with the X Pro 2. Yeah, so it was the X Pro 2. Man, I love the colors out of this camera. As much and as capable as the XT3 is, I love the X Pro 2. I actually have it right next to me. I still have not sold this. It's going to be a little bit difficult to part with this because this is my first Fuji camera. Second one I ever used, what really got me over was the X100F. That thing was so beautiful. I love that camera. I never shot 35mm either, like as a lens. And that 23mm lens on that, the 35mm equiv on crop was magic. I love that lens. And I was used to interchangeable lenses, and I love the rangefinder style. So I ended up buying this bad boy, and I have the 35-1.4, the 35 f2, and the 23 f2 on the XT3. There's something so special about the files on this this X-Trans sensor. I love it. And then of course there's the BSI sensor in this XT3 that's also beautiful and amazing for video and low light. It's pretty incredible. But we're here to talk about this and monochrome. So let's jump into it. Let's look at our files. So let's go. I'm gonna go to the recent import, and we're gonna go to the import of the 70 photos from today. And let's take a quick look. So the first thing I always do when I go through my images, I'll go through, and especially on this camera, I mean, I tried a few things. So some of these shots are not going to be good, right? The whole point of this live stream isn't necessarily to analyze the great/terrible photos and photography in this, and some of the ones that are in focus versus out of focus, more so like going through first impressions and then just using some of these tools to see exactly how they play, especially with these files. So I've tried a few things on this shoot. I tried some hip shots, and hip shots from 50mm are a little bit difficult. It was a lot easier on the Fuji and the 35mm. The field of view is just a little bit friendlier to hip shooting. So 50mm, there's definitely some missed shots. So towards the end here, I just played around and experimented with some hip shots. and I'm not expecting a high hit rate, to be honest with you. I was trying my my take at zone focusing, and I'm not very good at it. I'm still getting used to just this camera and the way it focuses, and I think the rangefinder is slightly off, but it's not terribly off. So when you're far away, you know, you're working with larger depth of field, and we'll see, we'll see. So I'm not promising anything. But what I'll like to do first is just go through these images and just pick out some ones that we actually do want to edit. So you'll want to probably do the same thing before going through. I'm not sure what your workflow is, but this is my typical workflow. So I'll go through and I'll usually check for focus. So it looks like, and again, this is the M9 monochrome. So this is an 18 megapixel camera. So we can't zoom in too much. I mean, this is 100% here. You know what I mean? So this is 200%. It starts to break, and you start to see pixelation pretty quickly. It's not like the A10 file, the 36 megapixels, or an XT3 file, or even honestly an X Pro 2 file. There's a little bit less zooming in, but that's okay because I like to get it right as much as I possibly can in camera anyway. So I'm not too worried about it. So I like this. I'm not sure if my wife's gonna like this. I'm just gonna go through the ones that are definitely out of focus. I misfocus here again too. I think I'm a little front focus. You can see the button and the part of the lapel, or no, I just missed her face actually. No, it's focused over here. So I'm gonna kill this. I'm just gonna delete some of these. We'll go quickly through them. I'm just hitting the delete key. So I'm just I clicked on one of these thumbnails, and all I'm doing is I'm just going up and down with the arrows, and I am just hitting delete on the ones that I don't like, the ones that are not keepers, and you're gonna see that they're just gonna add to this catalog trash here. So that's what we're doing. So this again is out of focus, so we're gonna trash. My wife wanted some photos of her entire outfit, and this is out of focus too actually. What I did was I recomposed. So with this rangefinder, you have a focus patch in the middle of the camera, and the focus patch is great, but the minute you recompose, sometimes you could throw it out, or if she moves, or if I move slightly, when you're shooting f2, which I was, it's pretty easy to lose focus. And not making excuses, I just missed focus. Let's see. So this one's out of focus too. But some of these, honestly, I don't care as much because I'm gonna keep these full, you know. So I'm not gonna crop this too much. And because of that, I think it matters a little bit less that it's in focus, at least on this. Again, this isn't a commercial shoot. I wouldn't necessarily use this for a commercial assignment at this type of camera, especially not until I got more comfortable. This is my first Leica camera and my first real rangefinder, and pretty much all manual setup. So I don't feel confident enough in my skills with it. So this is just, so for my purposes, I would honestly keep this because I really like this, and I think she would dig it. I love the depth of field, and the fall off is just beautiful. This lens is great. I love this lens. People, yeah, this is way out. Yeah, this is pretty. Here we go. Again, just missing her face, because what I'm doing is I'm focusing on her face, and then I'm like tilting the camera, you know, down and up to just reframe and recompose. So it does miss. See, this is front focus, like the buttons are sharper, and her the bow here is a lot sharper than her actual face is. But it somehow matters less, to be honest with you. Especially in this shot, I really just like it. I think it looks good, especially if you keep it full. If you don't crop too heavily on this, it becomes less noticeable, for sure. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep it. It looks a little nice and airy too with her hair. Again, beautiful fall off on this lens. I like this. I like all of these actually. This, let's see. Yeah, this is cool. Just doing some follow shots, and we had a pretty beautiful sunset today, before the sun went behind the clouds, and you'll see towards the end. This is really nice. This is nice. Yeah, it's pretty. I'll keep that. It's nice too. She's gonna hate these. I actually like these. She might hate this one more, so I'm gonna keep this one. She's not gonna like this one. This is pretty. This is nice. I mean, look at the fall off. This is at f2. I mean, this is just really nice. The Leica lens, because this lens doesn't have the contacts, it doesn't know. See, I'm going to the information pane. It actually doesn't know what f-stop I'm shooting at, which is pretty funny. It takes its best guess, to be honest. It thinks this is f4.5. It's not. It was shot wide open. So it's interesting. But I'm shooting base ISO. I was trying to get as much quality out of the sensor as possible. The CCD sensor on the original Monochrom and Monochrom is magic. When you get it right, and if you're not blowing out your highlights, as you see, I'm not on purpose. So let's backtrack. I underexpose these on purpose. I realize that these all need to be edited. Okay, so anybody commenting that, oh, these photos are really dark or too underexposed, if you're not familiar with the Monochrom, it's very easy to blow highlights and they are not recoverable. So I am purposely underexposing, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up the shadows. I'm going to bring up the exposures in post, and you'll see that in a second here once we start actually editing some of these favorites. So I deliberately underexposed, and you can see by my histogram I'm about, I try to keep, I don't want to go full stop. Depending on the lighting conditions, I've seen some noise and some grain, even at lower ISOs from the sensor, more so than I'm used to from Fuji or my Nikons in the past. But honestly, I'm cool with it because it looks really nice and organic, and it looks really filmic. It's beautiful. There's something special about this Monochrom CCD sensor, and I've heard people like Thorsten Orvegard. If you ever see this, Thorsten, you're the man. I've seen him talk about this. I've actually spoken with him on Instagram. Before purchasing this, I was looking at the 246. That was that one first caught my eye, and I asked him, and I read a bunch of things online, and people just prefer the files from this original one. And everybody was saying that the M10 Monochrom actually has files that resembled the original Monochrom, which is this camera. So it's kind of funny that Leica came out with this amazing CCD model. Everybody loved this camera. It was insane when they came out with this camera, right? And I don't want to market the camera too much, but I'm just so in love with it. I definitely don't want to have Leica lust, but I totally do, and I'll own up to it. This camera came out, and everybody was like, why would you put out a black and white only camera? And I've tried to explain this to people that I know that are not photo geeks and photo nerds, and it's very difficult to justify and explain to people in a way that makes you sound like you're still coherent and you're not going insane. And at the time, this camera was so expensive. So imagine paying, like, I forgot what the cost was brand new of this camera, but $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 euros for a camera that only shoots black and white. And the screen wasn't that great. The screen definitely isn't that great. I know Steve Huff talks about the screen on this and how much he hates it compared to the 246 and the 240. He's right. It sucks, but I really don't care. It's a thing that I just don't complain about this camera, man. Like I love the feeling of it, and it feels unique and it feels special. And then you had the 246, which had better screen, it had videos, and it had more modern features. And I heard that people just didn't want those. The Leica people, the pure Leica people, didn't want any of those features. They wanted something simpler. They wanted a simpler camera, simpler menu. They just wanted to shoot. They didn't care about video. I mean, you don't really use this kind of camera for video, at least, for any serious video. And then the M10 Monochrom came out, and apparently they try to tune the files to look like this. I mean, you're getting 40 megapixels, but the look is apparently very similar. And I mean, I can't speak to that camera because I had not shot with it yet. I'm sure it's incredible, but for my needs, I mean, this thing just feels special, man. And we'll go through and you'll see some of these files are just beautiful, and the way it renders skin is beautiful. The way it renders, certain situations is really beautiful. So I wasn't trying to piss too many people off today, so some of these are terrible, and I was trying to do some hip shots. So these are actually lower shutter speed. This was 1/45 of a second, and I was walking pretty quickly, so these are all terrible. Let's skip ahead. This is in focus. So now I stopped this down. I ended up stopping down the lens to play with zone focus and make my life a lot easier as we were walking. But again, my shutter speed wasn't helping me out here. I was trying to shoot at f8 and f11 and just shooting from the hip again. Yeah, these are all out. These are pretty terrible. And now see, once you're shooting at these higher when you're stopping the lens down, you could now start to see the sensor dust. So I want to go through and take care of that as well on these files, and we'll go through the tools that will enable us to do that. But some of these are so damn sharp, man. Yeah, my wife's not gonna like this photo. She doesn't like this either. Pretty sure she won't like any of this. As you can see, I'm not very skilled at shooting from the hip. Not yet, at least. That's okay. I'm gonna be working on it. I took these photos. We went for a photo walk at Torrey Pines, here in San Diego. Yeah, look, the sensor's got a lot of dust on it. Check that out, man. Gotta get this bad boy cleaned. Anyway, yeah, I don't love any of these. Again, just trying to shoot from the hip, and I wanted to see exactly like how much leeway I have when shooting super stop down. I try not to shoot this lens too stop down because I love the way, well, for two reasons. One, I love the way it looks at f2. I think the fall off is amazing, and when you get it right, it's pretty special. Two, there's obviously a lot of dust on the sensor. I have not gotten this clean yet, so I don't want any of this stuff. I don't have to take care of that in post later. I haven't had you know, the need to really shoot super stop down. Yeah, some of these are pretty bad. Here we go. So you'll see the limitations because this is super underexposed. You'll see the limitation on this. I was exposing for the sky, and anybody who shot Leica, the metering, especially in these M9s, they're not the best. But I wanted to preserve as much detail as possible, and you'll see that there's unrecoverable details even here. As underexposed as I am, you know, shooting backlit on my wife, this is lost here. There's a lost cause. I'll show you in a second. But let's play around with some of these. Oh yeah, we had these Where's Waldo people here. I don't understand. They're dressing up like elves. Let's kill that. If you want, check out my walkthrough, my photo walk that I did the other day. I posted that video and I actually mounted the GoPro to the hot shoe of this using, I got this mount from Amazon. I was originally going to use it for my Fuji's, and I forgot what brand this is. Smatree, S-M-A-T-R-E-E. I got it from Amazon. I think it was like 10-12 bucks. So that just goes into the hot shoe and screws down, and I'm able to mount that GoPro. I was just basically we just went for a sunset walk, and I just decided to bring the gear, and you'll see that video. I just do an uncut walkthrough, and I show the shot. So okay, so I'm happy with, let's say, I mean, I deleted a whole bunch of these, so I deleted about half of them. So let's just edit some of these. So let's see some ones that have some clear issues, and let's just edit. So the first thing I do before I start any edit is I always straighten my horizon. I try to keep it as level as possible. I'm trying to pay attention to this when I shoot in camera, so I crop as little as possible, especially with this 18 megapixel sensor. I don't want to, I want to shoot full frame as much as possible. I don't want to have to crop in if I don't have to. So I'm just going to level the horizon. So you can do that by going to the cursor tools, and right next to the crop, there's this straighten. You can press the R key, but it's a straighten tool. You could actually, if you click and hold, you'll see that there's the rotate, and you can rotate the image freehand, or if you click, there's a few more options for clicking to rotate the image left or right. If you have like a landscape image and it didn't auto rotate in the software for you, you could do that. But I'm gonna click the first option, which is straighten. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pick, you know, we're at the beach, so this is like best case scenario, right? You could use vertical lines too. So if you're in the city, sometimes what I'll do is I'll look for vertical lines, assuming that I'm not keystoning and I didn't tilt the camera up on a wider angle lens, and you know we started having these converging lines. Assuming I'm not really keystoning, what I like to do is just look for, if I have a horizon, I'll look for a horizon. If I know I shot this as straight as possible, I'll try to see what's something that should be straight, using that, just going vertically instead of horizontally on the straighten tool. So I'll just pick, and I'll just try to line this up and just see where it would be straight. So that's not too bad of a crop. That's okay. I'm happy with that. The next thing is what I like to do is if I can see them, if they're visible right away, I'll take out the sensor spots. So the way you can do that is there's a little paintbrush here. So that's the mask. That's the mask tool. You can draw masks around certain things, and you can manipulate certain areas of your photo. Like if you want to dodge and burn, you could mask out certain areas, and you could use the mask to dodge and burn and create separate layers. Right next to that, to the right of that, there's the healing tools. And if you click and hold, you'll see there's a remove spot. So there's a draw healing mask, a draw cloning mask, and then a remove spots. Or you can click the O key. And I'm going to zoom in on this. And what I'm doing is, so I hit Command plus to zoom in, Command minus to just zoom out. And if you want to pan, you can, if you could also zoom by using 2 fingers on your trackpad on a Mac. But if you want to pan while you're zoomed in, you could hold the space bar and you get the little drag cursor, and you could click and drag. Seeing as though I'm at the top of the frame, it doesn't let me drag in unless I zoom in a little bit more, and then I can drag in. But I'm no longer, oh, there's a spot. Okay, so to make the brush a little bit larger, there's multiple ways of doing this. What I do is I just I right click, and I get the little I get the menu option that lets me increase the radius of the brush, and then it asks what kind of, is it dust, is it a spot, like what is it. I always select dust for this, and I don't usually go much more. I go a little bit off the edge of the spot, so I don't make it the exact size of the spot. I just go a little bit larger, and that usually does the trick for me. So I'll just click, and if I zoom out, it should have gone away. So yep, it looks like it eliminated. There's another one right here. It's a little bit hard to see. I'm not sure if this actually comes out on the video, but there is another spot right here. I kind of got used to where they are now, so I usually see them if I'm shooting against like the sky. That's where I usually see them. So this is straightened up. The spots are gone to the best of my ability to see them on screen. And now what I usually do now is I go into developing and the actual image itself. So I'll take you through some of the presets I have too, if that's helpful for anybody. I do have presets. I'll show you how to get to them. I purchased a bunch. I created some offshoots off the ones that I purchased, and so on and so forth, to keep my workflow, 1, looking consistent, and 2, speeding it up. I like having a relatively unified looking collection of images. So and I know that sounds stupid now that I bought a camera that only shoots black and white, but especially with my Fuji stuff, like in a certain day, like when we go out and shoot, I'd like to have a consistent look to the images. So it helps just to develop a style and a look that's your own. I'm sure you guys follow a bunch of photographers online, and you could look at a photo and be like, okay, that's like a photo edited by this guy or shot by this guy, So anyway, so the first thing I'll do is I'll bring up the exposure a little bit. This is pretty underexposed, as you can see in the histogram. So I'm in the develop module. I am in so you can click to reorder these. So I'm just handling all the exposure settings right now. So what I'll do is I like to just open this up a little bit. So, and we can see how badly out of focus it actually is. It actually looked a little bit better. Oh, there we go. Sorry, it didn't. It kept a low res preview. So like while I was dragging, it was actually not as sharp, and I was like, what happened? It took a low res preview of it, which I wasn't aware of. But see, like now that I zoom in, see this a little bit, it's a lot sharper, and you can see like that. This is where that monochrome sensor really comes into its own here, because we're almost at 200% in terms of the zoom, and you can still see details even out of focus, right? This shot is not in focus on her face, but even out of focus, you can still make out like details on her face, like some of her pores, and you could even see this highlight in one of the pores on her face on a shot that's out of focus. So the detail is still pretty immaculate here, which is why I said it doesn't really matter that it's not as perfectly tack sharp, because out here, zoomed out here, it looks perfectly sharp to me. So only when you kind of zoom in can you nitpick and pixel peep, but I'm not going to do that. That's not what I'm here to do today. So I'm happy with this. I think that this is a good exposure. It's not too bright. but we had to open it up. We had to increase it by at least a stop and a half here. It was just too low, and you could see the way the light's just hitting on my wife's face. It just looks beautiful, um, and it helps that she's good looking too. So I'd rather have her in front of the camera than me. So anyway, what I'll also do is, depending on the shot, I'll take down some of the highlights. You know, I don't really like super bright highlights in my photography. I kind of like keeping it, you know, especially when you're talking about skin tones, I like making it look alive. And the whole point of this monochrome sensor is to retain tonality. You know, at least for me, like I bought it for a few different reasons. But one is just getting those immaculate tones that you just can't replicate, you know, with a color sensor. It just, you know, you're getting luminance values, and you're preserving when you have like a super awesome resolving lens like the Summicron. You know, this lens is great, and it resolves and handles light beautifully, even wide open. I mean, there is a little bit of vignetting, but I dig it. I'm not too upset by it. I think it looks great. And it just adds some sort of framing to this, and I've gotten used to it. I'm not the kind of person that hates the vignette. But anyway, so I like to preserve the skin tone. So sometimes I'll take the highlights down, even though I raise the exposure up, just to preserve the more tones throughout the tonal range of the skin. And that's really what I'm looking for in a portrait, is like I look at the skin first to make sure. One, you look at the eyes. I look at the eyes to make sure if they're in focus, because if the eyes aren't in focus on a portrait, or at least sharp enough when you zoomed out and you're looking at it at 100%, the kind of the photo's gone. You saw one of the ones that I edited earlier, like, was so out of focus. Like I focused on like the shore for some reason, and it was out. It was done. I mean, that wasn't usable, you know. So I look at her eye. I make sure that the eye closest to the camera's lens is as tack sharp as possible, and then from there I'll work on my exposure. I'll straighten what I need to straighten, and then I'll preserve skin tones. So I'll go through that, and this just looks great, man. I love this camera. So okay, so I'm happy with that. I usually don't. I'll play with contrast, and the saturation really doesn't make a difference because there's no color information. You know what I mean? So we could like oversaturate or desaturate. This doesn't really do anything on a monochrome file. So, you know, Kelvin too. This is my favorite one. Yeah, there you go. We want Kelvin. We can make this 14,000 Kelvin. Doesn't matter. It has no value here. So anyway, then what I'll do is, depending on the shot too, sometimes I'll open up the shadows. You know, like on something super underexposed, I'll open up the shadows. The reason why I'll do it is, one, I'll want a little bit more detail and definition in my wife's hair. You know, at least on this image, what I'll want to do is I'll want to get some more information here. And as I open the shadows, you'll start to see that if I zoom in, like if I go whole ham on this, you'll start to see that there's banding. You know, there's banding, and there's a lot of you know, luminance noise here in the shadows. And you know, on the sensor, I mean, not that this isn't passable, right? I would never ship it like this, but there is some noise. So I'll scale this back to make sure that we have some definition. The information's there, right? So I want to preserve as much of it as possible, but I also want to be aware that, you know, now I've just made the overall image brighter, and you know, so I'll play around with the shadows, and I'll probably dial back the exposure at this point, just to make sure that we're getting some more detail in the hair, but it's not impacting the rest of the image. And the whites and the blacks, I'll again, I play with these sliders to add some more contrast, you know, just overall in the image, you know, before doing any local adjustments and any local edits that I may want, which I'm not going to do in this video. And the last thing I do is I always go to the clarity and structure. So I'm really careful with these two, because especially on portraits, you could overdo it very quickly. And especially on skin, if you're editing you know, women, especially, and men too, like you can make them look really old, you know, a lot older, and you can make their skin crunchier. So you want to be just really careful. It just doesn't look as flattering, you know. You definitely want some of the details. Like I like sharpening slightly, but I'm really careful with the clarity and structure. And what I really love about Capture One is that That's one of the. This is actually the clarity section is probably some of like it's probably honestly my favorite section, to be honest with you, because at the time when I first launched Capture One, I was playing with this whole section. I remember I had a photo shoot where I was editing food, and I took photos with my Nikon, and I had photos with my Nikon. I was shooting with a macro lens, I believe a Sigma macro lens, and I came here, to this section, and I was blown away. I was like, man, they did such a good job. And at the time, it was just, to me, to my eye, it was just more natural sharpening. I love the structure. The natural method was just so much better than what Adobe was offering in Lightroom at the time, that I just kept using it for that shoot specifically. It was really, really awesome. So I love playing with this, but I don't overdo it. Again, I think a little bit of editing goes a long way. So I don't make I mean, this doesn't matter, right? So you see a number 26, that doesn't really matter. The most I'll ever do, honestly, is kill a lot of the highlights. That's usually what I'll do. That's something that I do pretty, heavily, but everything else I'm pretty conservative about. So dehaze, I don't mess with dehaze at all. I know people that love dehaze. I mean, we can go through dehaze, and we could just not sure if this actually does anything on the monochrome file. Yeah, it darkens everything. I don't play with dehaze, so this isn't something that I would ever use in my photography. And if you really want to get into your levels and your tone curves here, you can. This is very similar to Capture One Pro 20, so I don't see much in the way of difference. So what I will do usually is I will mess with the Luma curve on here, especially since I'm editing these white and black values, so these grayscale values. So I will usually apply a very slight S curve depending on the image to increase some of the contrast, and already it's just looking better, at least to my eye. So anyway, that's that. I don't add vignetting. Vignetting on this lens is pretty heavy, like you'll see in this shot here, especially shot wide open. So I don't mess with vignetting at all. I think it's naturally there, and I'll keep what's naturally there. I won't add any of that artificially. Other things we can play with. What I'll do, I think we should look at presets maybe last, and how that's changed perhaps in this version of Capture One Pro 21. Maybe we should just edit a few of these and then go to those presets, and I can walk through some of the ones that I own. What I'll do now is, once I'm really happy with a photo in a sequence, especially since these are all relatively shot in the same light, what I'll do is I'll copy and paste the adjustments on a few of these and see and tweak them just slightly. It saves me on time. So I'll go to the file that I like, in which case it was this original file, which I think looks great, and I'll click on copy, and I'll go to the next photo, and you could highlight a sequence of photos by holding down the shift key and clicking, but in this case I'll just go to the next one, and I'll click the apply, and again it's just there. It looks great, and I already have an awesome starting point for this image that I'm happy with. Again, it's slightly out of focus, but when you're zoomed out, it's not as noticeable, especially on this full length portrait of my wife. Now, what this didn't do was take out any of the sensor noise, and what it didn't do is level the horizon. So whenever I copy paste settings from one photo to the next, I'll end up going back and I'll straighten, and I'll do those things we actually did first in the other photo. So there's the before, there's the after. I think it looks great. I think this is a great starting point for this image. And now we can go in and we can see that there's a little blotch here. I'm not sure. Actually, oh, did it preserve? It did preserve these. Okay, so that's not good. Oh, it did preserve these. Okay, well, I didn't want that. So I don't know why I recall Capture One Pro 20 not copying the actual spot healing. Don't want to speak too confidently to that though, but I swear it didn't do that, because obviously that's different for every single photo. So you wouldn't necessarily want, like in my case on a landscape photo, you know, if you edit a landscape photo, the spots are going to be in completely different places. And if you have a super detailed image, what it'll do is it'll sample to try to get rid of that. So it'll sample around and try to remove and do the difference between what it considers a spot and the background. And sometimes you can get some really off effects and just have like dots throughout your photo, and you don't really want that. They stand out. Like, trust me, they stand out. So I don't like that. I don't like that copied it over. So Capture One, I don't know if I just did something wrong there. That's interesting. That was so strange. That was really strange to me, because I could have sworn it didn't do that. Okay, I don't know. We'll move on. But I can't do the shortcut for because I have a color picker. So I have a color picker installed, and it actually mimics the shortcut of the copy. So that's why I didn't do the shortcut for copying, and I just use the tools here. But okay, so there's that. Pay attention to that, and just understand that you may not want to do what I just told you to do, which is clean up the image first, and then start, you know, editing. So you'll definitely, I think it's good practice, depending on, you know, how you like to work, to do your local adjustments last and in your global adjustments first. So global adjustments to exposure, color, toning your image, and then those like airbrushing, or if you're going to do any dodging and burning, those would be local adjustments, right? You do those last. You'd always do those last anyway. So you should probably not follow the advice I gave at the beginning. Again, like, everybody's workflow is a little bit different. If you know where like the issues lie in your photos, and like, for example, see, there's another one here. This is a pretty big spot. If you know where they are, you know, and you just knock them out really quickly, that's fine, you know. But you may make more work for yourself if you know, what you don't want to do. So anyway, I'll straighten that. Great. That I'm happy that didn't necessarily come over, which is awesome. So I'm happy with this. I think this looks great. I think this is a great example of the tonality and the tonal range of this camera, and this file. Again, I underexposed on purpose so we can get this awesome, you know, this great look to it. So let's copy. Again, we'll go to this photo. This is a little bit more similar to the previous photo. So again, I'm just gonna kill these. Again, see, they didn't fully transition. These spots aren't fully correct. I actually really like this. I think this looks good. This is a little bit brighter. The sun was going down as I shot this, so keep that in mind. The settings are the same. This might be even prettier. Let's see. Let's take a look. Yeah, this is nice. So let me straighten this. So again, just hitting the R key or coming up to your toolbar, and then going back. I just go back to the, you know, you can hit the V key to go back to select, so you're out of the rotation. Sometimes I'll forget to hit V, and I'll still be in the rotate pane, and I'll try to go through and I'll like remove something, like I'll do a spot, and then I'll turn the image like a weird way, like, no. So just be mindful of that whenever you're you know, you're straightening out your photo. This is nice too. I really like the way this is actually, there has some motion blur. I think I shook. This is 1/250th of a second. And again, so you start to see the pixelation if you zoom in to 200% and further, you start seeing the actual pixels. But zoomed out, I think it looks beautiful. It looks beautiful. So I'm digging it. Just digging it. I think this looks really nice. I think you should be really happy with this photo. What I would maybe do is open up some of these shadows a little bit on this photo. Let's see, just to get a little bit more separation between her legs. Like, the leggings she was wearing were pretty dark, and the sand was gray. They're not as dark, so I think that just helps distinguish her legs a little bit better. So I'll go a little bit more heavy-fisted here with the shadows. And let's just check. See, you could see like the ripples and everything in her in her leggings. I think that looks a little bit better. Okay, let's continue on. I'm going to copy these settings. I'm going to go to the next photo. Great. That looks really nice too. I love this lens. Wide open, it's just so nice. Showing f4.5 here, but it's wide open. I'm wondering if there's people in the live chat. So far, nobody. But let's keep it going here. So great. So now this is kind of this follow cam image of my wife. I'm gonna go to the second one and just use the previous settings to really open this up first. And this is way too overexposed for my liking, but it's a good start. And again, I'm going to straighten out the photo first. And now I'm gonna go back, and I think the shadows could definitely come down. I think I want to add a little bit more mood to this, and I think the exposure in general is a little too hot. So there's a few things. I mean, I rarely play around with the contrast. This actually is a pretty contrasty lens, straight out. In the shot comes out pretty contrasty. I don't usually like making a shot milky or actually add contrast, but I'm very careful about it because again, the lens is pretty contrasty already. So that's nice when it comes to my editing because the shot's already pretty close, especially if I get it right in camera, if I'm not overexposing, and losing detail, or, if the shot's not right in the camera, it's just not right, period. It's not going to look, no matter what you do to post, there's only so much you can do, right? So it's already a little contrasty coming out, so I usually don't play around with contrast. I know certain people do. I'm not one of them. Let's see. This is beautiful too. I'm going to, I really like the other settings I use, so I'm gonna copy these over, and you can see this is ridiculously sharp. The shoreline, I shot this wide open again, and the shoreline is less obvious that it's off center to me, so I'm gonna leave that be. But what is obvious is this spot, the sensor dust. So I will kill that. Oops. Hello. Yeah, there we go. I will kill that. And there was one down here. There we go. Yeah, that looks good. That looks really good. This is a little bright. What we can do is we can make this a little bit moody, and we can actually play with some. Let's play with some local adjustments. So let's take the exposure down a little bit because I want to brighten her up a little bit. So we could do a few things. We could draw a mask. So we could absolutely draw a mask, and I love using this. So this is like having a brush, and again, you can. I don't have a Wacom tablet any longer. I took a break from doing a lot of photography, heavy duty photography, and actually ended up giving it away. But this is where a Wacom tablet is king, because you have a really super sensitive, tablet that adjusts to your pressure, so you can really fine tune how much how much of the effect you actually brush on to a designated area. So I'm just using my trackpad. I just have the regular trackpad. So I'm assuming most people do. Most people don't invest in that extra bit of equipment. Although if you do a lot of editing, heavy-handed editing, I strongly suggest you do. I think it's amazing, and you could program it for different short keys. As long as you get used to it, I think it's pretty. It's a great tool. So I highly recommend it. But I right-click to just increase the size of my brush. I'm not gonna go too crazy. I like going soft on the brush. So as you can see, the further to the right you go, there's a little ring in the center, and then there's an outer ring that shows the feather of the brush. So I like, generally I like to feather out. So I'll actually want it to go down a little bit, and I'll make my brush a little bit larger as well. And I don't like the flow and opacity to be really high. I don't want 100%. I want to gradually build an effect. So I actually go down to like 10% on like both, and I want to see. I want to build the effect. I want to layer it. You're painting. You know what I mean? You're painting this effect in, and I'll show you how that works. So what you'll do is you'll start painting on a designated area, right? And you'll see that it's turning a little bit red. As you paint, it'll turn more and more red, And what I'm doing is I'm feathering. I'm going to feather this exposure in. So what I'm doing is I'm just brushing the front edge of my wife here, and I'm going to zoom in, and oops, I'm going to zoom, come on. I'm going to zoom in, and I'm going to go down with my brush, and I'm going to just brush just on where this light is hitting, and I'm going to increase the exposure. And you'll see, I'm going to do this gradually, and it's going to look great. I'm just building on this effect, you know what I mean? I don't want to go too heavy-handed. Again, everything is super controlled. And you'll see that when you add a new brush, you're going to have a new adjustment layer. So now, this adjustment layer is painted on top of the background. So what I love is that it automatically creates one for you when you are doing these local adjustments like this brush. So if you don't like it, you could disable it, or you can kill it altogether. So it's a really non-destructive way of working, and it's built to be non-destructive, which, trust me, will save you. So you'll see where I painted if I just crank the exposure. See, even if I crank the exposure, right, it's like 4 stops cranked. It's not that crazy, right? So again, I just want to increase the exposure by maybe 1 stop on that. And what we'll do is we'll just continue to paint, and we're gonna build. We're just gonna build this effect in. We're gonna build that extra 1 stop, and you're gonna see that it's just gonna get a little bit darker in these areas. Like the red's gonna be a little bit darker, and it's gonna be very slight, but it'll matter. I'm just gonna brighten up her face, and I'm just clicking. That's all I'm doing. I'm just clicking and just layering on top of this. Instead of just going really heavy-handed, this obviously takes more time, but you have way more control. And although it won't be as profound, it will make a difference of an effect, and you'll see. So this is before, and then now if I reveal this, see just a little touch of sunlight. The sun's coming in from in front of her. It's coming in from the far right corner of the shot. And at this point, the sun's honestly behind the clouds, so the light is super diffused, and it's actually reflecting off some of the clouds, the higher clouds. So it's just super diffused already, and I'm just giving it a little extra kiss of light on her, just a little bit, not much. And again, before and after. I think it looks great. Again, just keeping the background a little bit darker in the shot, just kind of really just draws more attention to her. So those are some local adjustments. I just wanted to go make sure that we hit those two and see how they apply. And they apply honestly really naturally. Like, if you do a poor job in the past or in other programs, if you do a really poor job of applying your brushes, you do see it spilling out in really distracting ways, and you get weird haloing, and it looks sloppy. It looks like you did it, like, especially if you go into Photoshop and you go very heavy-handedly on your layers, or if you don't use layers and you're just like, hey, YOLO, we're gonna go for it here and just chuck and pray. It can, I should say, have a really negative end result, and it looks like you edited the shot, and it looks poorly done. It's like one of those really, old HDR photos from when people were using Flickr and just doing like those manual HDRs. I'm talking about like 2006, 7. You'd go on Flickr and everything was like this disgusting looking HDR. It was terrible. I mean, some people really liked them. I hated them. I never thought they looked good. You could tell it was edited. It just doesn't look like anything that's real or out of this world, So anyway, spiel over. But yeah, so again, that was a little bit of local adjustments on this image. And what you can do is, honestly, if you want, you could even feather it even more. So you saw me feathering the effect and feathering the brush and just layering it and building the effect slowly. If you don't like it or you want to scale it back, like I know some people that if you're doing color images, for example, and you want to, add add some extra toning, or add you want to go pretty heavy handed, what you can also do is scale it back. If you're like, yeah, I think I went a little bit too hardcore, you, instead of erasing something, you could just scale it back and just feather it in, and just change your opacity. In my case, I'm going to go 100% since I controlled it from and I built it up, but that is available to you. So what you'll want to do is you'll want to click on adjustment layer, and then you'll get this opacity slider, and you can play with it. Now, be aware that if you're selected on the adjustment layer, first of all, you could have multiple adjustment layers, right? So if you're doing color, and you want to make sure that the skies, has a little different of a color temperature, or you want to, color balance your image a certain way, you can do that. You can just keep stacking your adjustment layers and adding a specific effect on a specific layer. I recommend that, because then, you'll be able to just go through and build the effect, right? And you can take away if you don't like something. Also, I really like the fact that if you right click, you could rename something. So if you do have a lot of adjustment layers and you work with adjustment layers pretty heavily, it's always nice to just organize your work and understand that, like, okay, this is like the blue color, or this is like a soft grad that I applied to the exposure of the sky in an image, so you can, it's not literally named adjustment layer 1 to whatever, right? So I would strongly recommend you renaming layers. I don't typically work with adjustment layers when I'm just editing my personal photos. I will, especially and obviously on, photos that need it, and for certain client work that needs the extra TLC, absolutely. But for personal photos, depending on how I shot it, and if an image doesn't need it, I don't try to add things it doesn't need. It's kind of like a guitar solo. If like a song needs it, then give it that guitar solo. But if it doesn't really need it, then like, why? You know what I mean? So that's the Kirk Hammett argument from Some Kind of Monster. If you guys ever saw that doc, that was a pretty good one. I digress. So this is very similar to this photo. I'm not going to go through. I want to edit this one though, because this one, or oh no, this is prettier. Let's do it. She hated both of these images, by the way. She's not gonna be very happy that I'm literally doing a live stream and editing these, but I think they look beautiful. I think my wife is beautiful, so there you go, sweetheart. Let's apply the adjustments, and let's tone this down here. So let's tone this down. I think this looks good. I think this looks nice. And there's something so nice. It's super natural. So like this is a good example of this monochrome sensor. Like, look at the skin tones, man. I mean, there's nothing blown out here. It's just very, very natural. It's very natural. Like the fall off, the amount of gray. It just looks amazing. And this lens, like, look at the fall off on this lens. Like, this is a hair strand, and it just melts. That background. This is f2. And honestly, this is even the Summicron that everybody loves, the Apo. It's not the Apo. This is the version 3. This is like the bastard love child of the Leica world. I mean, certain Leica connoisseurs love this lens. I love this lens. And other people just see this as one of these dog lenses that Leica made. I disagree. I couldn't disagree more. Sure, the build quality isn't, like a version 5 build. I love the version 5 is beautiful. That's the first Leica lens I ever held in my hand, and it was one of those like whoa kind of experiences. But this lens focuses just beautifully. I mean, there's a little bit of play in the aperture ring. Okay, doesn't bother me. Look at the result, right? The optical formula is basically the same. I mean, the optical formula in these Summicron lenses, albeit the coatings have changed, is relatively similar. So like the version, I believe 3 to version 5, the optical formula and characteristics and the lens arrangement is the same. And this lens was built between 1969 and 74, I believe. So they got it right back then, and they've just improved on the coatings and the overall aesthetic and build quality of the lens. They've added the retractable hood on the version 5, which is nice. But I like these pedal hoods anyway. I think they just add that extra layer of protection, and they just, look at that, they just look beautiful, don't they? And that red filter, man, that red filter is sick. I know you're not really supposed to use a red filter for portraits, but I love the contrast. And I just love the way it just knocks out a blue sky. It's I think it looks great. I will say that for some of these, I did take the filter off. So like when we turn back around here on some of these, I did take the filter off. And you can see that the sky just loses, it just becomes a little bit whiter, right? Like there's, not that there was a lot of clouds, but you could see some cloud detail here in some of these photos here. This is attributed to the red filter really knocking out some of these blues and bringing down the exposure on those blues. But here, for example, see how white that is? And this is this was like F11, F8 or F11. I believe it might have been F8 actually, and you can see it's a white sky. So I took it off. The red filter takes about 3 stops of light out, and it's not, it takes about 3 stops of light. So it was already dark. It was getting there, and this is 1/90th of a second, and I was shooting ISO 1600. So even at ISO 1600 on a camera that's pretty old, still really clean. And the noise that is there is just really nice and organic. It's almost like grainy. It's like film grainy. It's really nice. So let's take out some of these sensor spots. How about that? Because these are pretty ugly. Let's straighten. Yeah. Let's straighten. And then we could just edit this from scratch, or yeah, it's nasty. See, look, you could overdo it. I think this was actually a little overexposed to begin with. But it's not blown out, which is nice. So we're not hitting the right side here, which is pure white, on the histogram, which I'm happy about. So that's the key, and you'll see why in a second here. So this, like now there's a lot more spots. Like you could see there's so many tiny little freckles here. And Adam, you warned me. It does need a sensor cleaning. You are not lying. But I don't shoot this stop down anyway. Just like you said, it doesn't affect the image in most cases. But it gives me an opportunity to show you Capture One's ability to remove spots. So now here's what I did, right? So you saw that some of these smaller freckles, they were handled without any issues. Now I had an issue here because, again, like I said before, you want to make that spot a little bit larger. You want to make it a little bit larger, and you see the minute I do, it'll knock that spot out, you know, or not actually. Let's see. Come on, Capture One. Huh? Is it having a difficult time? Have we broken it? Oh no. Let's kill that and try this again. Yeah, this is having a difficult time. Okay. I mean, we could yeah, so let's see. So I'm going to clone this out. So that's another tool. So sometimes like I just demonstrated, it will not do what you want it to do. Like any piece of software, it's contextual. It has limitations in certain scenarios, and what I did there was I basically clone stamped it out. So if you're familiar with Photoshop has a tool called clone stamping, and what you basically do with clone stamping is, one, you'll want to hit S, the S key, or click on right next between this is the erase mask. So between the mask and the eraser, there's the healing tools. So the cloning mask is the clone stamp tool. What you basically do with the clone stamp tool is, once you select S and you're in the tool itself, one, you can again right click and you can make the radius smaller on the actual sample point, but you'll want to select the point in your image, right, that will most closely resembles what you want the defect of the image to be. So for example, I have a little spot right here. Actually, I have a few spots right here. What I can do is, with the clone stamp tool, sample a point that's right next to that spot, hit Option. So click and hold Option. It'll sample a point right here where the cursor is. Okay, it's going to sample that point. And now I want to eliminate the points that are, and you could do a lot of them actually. You can kind of go through and really clean this up. But you basically sample a point, and then you heal the point that with a similar spot from your sampled spot. So that's the basic premise of it. You find an area that looks clean or similar to what you would want your final image, the troubled area to look like. And I mean, look, I'll give you a even better example. We could clone stamp people out. We could clone stamp rocks out if we really want to. So some shots are really busy. If I really wanted to, we could actually theoretically take out people out of the shot. Like that's what, you know, that's what clone stamping can be very useful for. You could actually like take distractions out of a shot. You know, that kind of ruin. Let's see. Let's for example, like say we're, you know, we want to take out this bush. I don't want to do a whole person, but we theoretically could if we had enough detail. If I want to take out this bush, right, what I can do is I'll make this a little bit larger, and I'll close stamp an area here. So I'll keep up the shoreline and the coastline, and you'll see why I'm doing that in a second. I'll sample from here, and I'll clone stamp that out. And what it'll do is, there we go. I just have to move this point. And you move it to a point that looks very similar to that which you're trying to heal, you know, so, you know, something like that. It's a little bit difficult when you have a really detailed area. So see how I just did that? It becomes hard, it becomes difficult to see. If you're doing something like grass and that's really detailed, it works easier on this 18 megapixel camera, to be honest with you. It's just, it lets you just sample a point, and that wasn't really sharp to begin with, but we can clone stamp people out if we really want to. You just have to sample right next to the person. So for example, if I want to clone stamp this lady walking, you know, you could theoretically click and drag, and what it'll do is it'll just erase her. So you don't have to just click, you could actually click and drag, and you could just move the point. So we're actually like replacing her with something that would be in that scene. So if you want to make a half ghost lady, hashtag half ghost lady, you have a ghost lady. Who says ghosts aren't real? That's one way of doing it. I'm not going to do that though. First of all, I don't really like this image. But anyway, so that's what you can use the clone stamp tool. So as you can see, when we had an issue with the regular dust removal tool, we can always just default to the clone stamp tool and stamp it out. That's what I would do. In most cases anyway. So it gives you a little bit more control because like you saw, you're relying on the software with the spot removal tool to get rid of the software. But yeah, anyway, so let's go through some of these other photos. Let me show you some recovery. Let me show you some shadow recovery here. How about on this photo? This will be a little bit easier to recover. So I can just go into this, and we could definitely recover a lot here, but we're now blowing everything out. As you can see, everything's pushed out to the right. So you can actually bring up a lot of these shadows, and there are a lot of details in these shadows. There's also a lot of noise. Can't really push too hardcore on the shadows of this camera. You know, there's a lot of there's 1 to 2 stops more of dynamic range on these cameras, but the M9 wasn't necessarily the most stellar at dynamic range. Basically, you want to get it right. Just get it as close as you possibly can in the camera. The software is there to be a tool to help you, you know, kind of finalize a photo, but you really want to, even if you shoot to edit later, like I have to, because I have to physically like underexpose in order to preserve a lot of these highlight areas. Even if you shoot to edit, you want to keep your editing, I think, 1, for time's sake, to a minimum. And 3, you know, it's just, you want to practice good technique, especially in the field. I mean, you want to make sure that your shots aren't, you know, out of focus. You want to make sure your shots aren't blurry. You have proper camera holding technique, and 1, you have shots that are worth looking at, right, and that you're happy with. So when you come to this portion, you know, you don't have to do that much, right? That's kind of the idea. So let's see, some of these other ones are pretty cool. Let's I think we can play around with, so we've touched on some of the tools here. Let's try to play with auto adjust and see what this does, because this isn't bad at all. Let's see what Capture One is telling us. So we could auto adjust exposure, brightness, contrast levels, and rotation. We could actually do keystoning too. I don't have anything that requires keystone correction, but I'd be curious to play with that actually for auto adjusting for keystoning things, because this actually didn't do that terrible of a job. If I'm looking at the auto adjustments. Did it what did it do for us specifically? It didn't touch white balance, it just touched the shadows and a little bit on the exposure. It didn't do anything to the curve or level. Yeah, it pulled in some of the levels. So we see some of these RBG. Yeah, so it pulled in some of the levels. What else did it do? There's no green blue detail, so it messed with that. It didn't add a curve to anything, which is good. We wouldn't want it to do anything to the contrast that we didn't tell it to do necessarily. Not bad. How about on something like this that's overexposed? At least has some areas of overexposure. Okay, so it correctly knows to add some more shadow detail here, and it does more, and it actually underexposed this a little bit. We probably saw this scene as a little too bright. Interesting. Again, it's clipping some of the right here and the left actually in the levels in the RGB channel, which is interesting though, because there's no red, green, or blue information. It is just affecting. I could technically just do Luma. It's not doing that though. Okay, I'm just curious to see what it would do. And obviously it still needs work. It's only touching two things here, but it's there for you. I personally wouldn't recommend it. I think Capture One makes it so easy to edit already, and it's pretty straightforward, at least in the exposure tab. Now, where you can have some more hiccups is in the color editor. The color editor is very advanced for Capture One, and there's so many different ways of editing color in Capture One and mixing color. I think this by far is, especially, you know, the skin tone matching, and the tools to edit color images in Capture One I think far surpass anything else available in the market right now. You have to spend some time with it for sure, and you have to make your changes, you know, again, minimally, but the results are great. I think that the results are fantastic when you are actually editing color. You have way more control. You have a lot of different ways to visualize what you're actually doing, and I think it makes for a better result. You know, you get better color images for sure, especially if you're split toning or if you're grading. I mean, it's just way better. If you work with color, color is one of the reasons to definitely consider Capture One. In addition to getting more detailed files, I find it does a little bit better with files than Lightroom. Especially on the Fuji cameras. Like on my Fuji cameras, I wasn't that happy. I like the colors, but again, they're Adobe's interpolation of Fuji colors. Fujifilm actually worked with Phase One to develop the film profile. So if you shoot RAW on a Fuji camera, and this is marketing Fuji, which I'm happy to do. I think Fuji has some amazing cameras and incredible colors. Especially if you want to keep your editing to minimal amount, you know, you shoot in RAW, and you could choose a film preset that you really like, one of those film simulations like a classic Chrome or an Astia, which I love I love Astia for portraits. You can apply and change it after the fact, and they're accurate. They're tuned with Fujifilm, so they're going to be more accurate to the colors you get out of the camera for sure, out of the simulations, than in my experience than using Lightroom's interpretation of those simulations. So just food for thought. But for monochrome, I mean, this is fine. This looks good. So what else did I want to play with? I want to see how so one thing that I really rely on, and I think a lot of photographers rely on, are presets. I think presets are invaluable. It makes your job so much easier, from, you know, getting a consistent look to within your catalog or body of work, or just in general. And I have a ton. I have a lot of presets. I think you know, probably have a little too many, especially now that I'm not shooting color any longer. But the presets, you can go over. So we were in the exposure tab. You go over to, and we're in the styles and presets. So there's a bunch of built-in styles and a bunch of built-in presets. Typically, when you work with, when you download Capture One, sometimes there's certain offers on seasonal styles and presets. Or if you just buy them, you buy the packs outright, you can just have them installed. I don't mess around with too many of their personal built-in ones, so like their black and white presets. You could preview a lot of them just by hovering over and seeing what it does to your photo. So again, I'm just hovering. I'm not adding anything here. A lot of the color ones won't. Some of these are for color photos. you know, and some of this toning, this cyan toning, split toning, and adding color to these images, which I don't want to do. This is nice. I do like the toning of the sepia look. I think it looks nice. This is pretty nice, actually. I do like that. What I do is I purchase some, and I've created some. There's sharpening presets. I mean, there's pre-sharpening, there's soft sharpening, there's so many sharpening presets here. What I do though is I go to the ones there's user styles. I've imported a bunch of these presets that I've purchased in user styles, so I have a bunch of film simulations that are awesome to play with. And I mean, you're talking about Fuji simulations, you're talking about Ilford simulations, and they're great. I mean, Cinestill, there's so many awesome film presets here. And I forgot where exactly I purchased this film simulation pack. If I remember, I'll put it in the description link after this video goes live, or is posted as a final version. So, I mean, I'll just go through some of these. My favorites, I really don't want to do this. I know some people are going to roll their eyes, but I love Tri-X, baby. Like, I know you go into, like, you're talking about Leica film and Tri-X, like the standard classic black and white, you know, combo. But dude, there's something special about it, man. It just looks so good. I'm sorry. I know I shouldn't like it and just have it my default go-to. But there's something special, especially this gentleman that put these together. Just nailed it, man. I think it looks great. And I actually have a version of this. What I ended up doing was, so this is the Tri-X. There's a contrasty version of the Tri-X, and then there's a less contrasty version. I mean, you can go super hardcore, like you go T-Max, you know what I mean, if you really want super hardcore contrast stuff. But I'll go into, what I did was I went into the Tri-X 400 and I actually modified the style. So you can see there's a bunch of, you know, organic film noise added to this. I just look so clean. I love this. I love this look. But I don't necessarily love the noise. So what I ended up doing was I messed around with it and I created my own preset for a cleaner profile that doesn't have all the noise, but does retain a lot of the contrast curves. And I prefer that, honestly. And so I'll just toggle mine on. I think that looks good. I also downloaded, Thorsten Overgaard has some awesome presets that he has available as well. So check Thorsten's stuff out, especially if you shoot Leica. I found his to be nice as well. He's got some nice black and white adjustments and the color corrections. And I've actually used his his color skin tone adjustments for my Fuji photos. So Thorsten, shout out to you, man. You did a great job with those, because Fuji's colors are amazing, but you know, sometimes they could be a little too saturated too. So I think him toning it down, I think is really nice, and just making skin just look a little bit more natural. I think he did a great job. So I use those from time to time as well. And then, you know, I have some other color presets here, but this hasn't changed, and I'm happy it hasn't changed, because I think this is some of the greatest way to finish a photo. You know, just by going in and applying, after you do all your global adjustments, after you do some of your local adjustments, coming in and finishing it off with a look that you have. I mean, that's kind of the complete picture, isn't it? You know, because then you end up with something like this that, for example, I'm very happy with this photo. And, you know, if I say I want to tweak something else, like maybe I want to bring a little bit more, increase the exposure a little bit on the ground here, because the sand's not black. It was dark. It was very dark gray, but it's not black. And to just define my wife's legs a little bit better, excuse me. I'll go in and do that after the fact, just as a final step. But I think this looks great. Other tools I don't use the grid. The grid's available to you when you crop. I don't use the grid. Exposure warning, I really don't use that either. I guess we could try to go for one that has some blown out highlights. I don't use this, but you can see where the highlights are blown specifically. You know, you may want to crop around this. I don't use this again, just I try to handle this myself. I think that pretty much wraps it up. I don't know what else to really go through, other than I love this system. I don't want to fanboy too hard. I understand that I have been. I literally called this Capture One Pro and Leica stream, so I understand that. I acknowledge that. So, um, but I do really like this. I think Capture One lets everybody from a seasoned professional to or a beginner to a seasoned professional edit very quickly, very confidently, and it gives you a great mix of pro tools as well as, you know, beginner friendly tools to just give you some great results. Obviously, if you shoot raw, you're going to get better results than if you shoot with just JPEG straight out of the camera, in my opinion, and just you have more detail to work with. And if you're going to be post-processing after the fact anyway, why not shoot in a format that's going to give you the most image detail, right? So it just gives you more control at the end of the day. So if you shoot in RAW, if you are moving from 20 to 21, it's going to be a relatively easy adjustment, albeit you do have to make sure you have like your license key and everything handy when you sign up. That's really the only downside, is just what I've noticed is that every single time there's an update of Capture One, there's a little weirdness with just getting logged in and getting your license authenticated. But hopefully moving forward, we could just update, you know, relatively easily through the app itself for Capture One Pro 21, and just not have to worry about it. But again, you will have to log in, you will have to enter your license key, and it'll pair your login credentials with your license key, and you'll just want to launch the app. It'll find your catalog, no worries about that. And then the tools, as you saw, are basically identical. I mean, you could adjust this workspace to see fit, and honestly, I would, and this is actually wrong. We want to, I don't understand why it used this. Oh, that's weird. Okay. I actually didn't realize that. I did not realize that it used that profile. Hey, aren't we glad that we went through this? Because now I know it was using the wrong lens profile. Okay. Summicron. Do we see Summicron? Where's the Summicron 50 millimeter? Am I blind? I'm sure somebody's yelling. What I'm doing is, I don't know if you can see this menu. What I clicked is I clicked on the profile. I'm in the lens corrections, and I clicked on the profile because it was default set to the 23 millimeter Fuji 9 lens, which is not correct for obvious reasons. Let's go. Where is Summicron? Summicron 28. Oh, here it is. Sorry. Wow, I was totally blind. Okay, Summicron 50. No diffraction correction. Does it? Huh. Okay. I mean, I don't really see. Honestly, I don't see much of a difference. I mean, these lenses are so well corrected. I mean, kudos to Leica on some of these lenses. Even in Lightroom, like if you select the lens corrections, like they're so well corrected that you hardly ever see any changes to the actual image. But it's good to know that this wasn't in that. Anyway, it's good to know that it wasn't in the right lens. So that's really it. Honestly, I don't have anything else. I'm happy. Again, a lot of this is the same. I hope you are too. I hope if you don't already have Capture One that you at least try the trial and see what you think. This is not a sponsored video, by the way. I'm not sponsored by Leica. I am not sponsored by GoPro. I'm not sponsored by Fujifilm. I'm not sponsored by Apple. Definitely not sponsored by Adobe or Capture One. I just use these tools. I've used them professionally. I use them personally, and I enjoy them. I think that they're great, especially Capture One. I think this new iteration, I'm curious to see what like impressions will be just using this after a few more months. I doubt if they're going to change, because I love Capture One Pro 20. But again, we'll see. You know, you never know. That's it though. I don't think there's anything else left to cover. I hope you enjoyed this. This was a cool live stream. I've wanted to do a photo based one because what I was doing for the past few weeks was just working on code and client work and projects, and I didn't really get a chance to go through and really showcase other work that you could actually see me working on live. So this was a great opportunity, and seeing as though Capture One just got released, I thought that this would be a cool first video to add that of this type, where you actually see me doing some sort of work. Still figuring out some of the bugs, some of the little niggles with just getting up and live, but look, hey, it's part of the process, right? Anyway, hope you enjoyed this. This is what, an hour and a half so far, which is gonna be my shortest one. This was definitely my shortest one. I've done a few live streams, one this week that went like 6 hours, but don't want to put you through that. And you didn't see anything. You just saw my face the whole time, and you saw my painful expressions. But let's stop it here. Thanks for watching. If you did and you tuned in, if you're watching this after the fact, hopefully you got a good look at Capture One Pro 21. And yeah, thanks. Until next time. I plan on doing a few more of these live photo edit sessions, especially different scenes. You know, I live in San Diego. There's plenty to shoot even during this lockdown that we're in again. There's still a lot of reason to go outside and, you know, just make the most of the time, you know, we have available to us. So I'm going to continue doing that, and we'll do a few more of these live edits. I think Friday, a way to end a stressful work week is with some photography and some editing. I think would be a good thing. So thanks for tuning in. Catch you on the next one. Have a great weekend.